That's a vision.
It was.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm here.
You're here, yes?
That's most of what I can say about how I am at the moment. But you'll get to explain why that is.
Yeah, I'm still non-existent.
Yeah, and we had a planned topic.
Yeah, we had one, and then shit hit the fan. Oh, I said a bad word.
Nope. Well, we're getting demonetized anyway. This stream is
Yeah.
definitively going to get demonetized. If you ever thought about donating and held off because Akeda is a Chad, this would probably be the stream to do it because there is a 99% chance that when this stream is done processing that it's getting demonetized because we're going to be talking about all the things YouTube thinks are too controversial for YouTube. But it's also really important that you guys know what's going on. Anyway, Mero, you had an explanation because we always do our pre-topic. This is how this stream came to be because we had a plan and that plan is clearly not the title of this video. So let's talk about why.
Yes, okay. So we actually had several plans. First time around, we were going to talk about how fear of snakes is taught, and then there's some biological aspects as to why people are afraid of snakes. So I wanted to talk about how fear of snakes, and then Ali found something about the WHO being stupid.
So we were going to talk about snake oil instead.
Yeah, then we're going to talk about snake oil. And then, so I was like, all right, well, we'll put that back off by a week. And then Ali just went, oh my God.
And then my country got set on fire.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, yours is also on fire right now, but for a completely different kind of fire.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully it won't be the same, but it's an El Nino year this year. And so we could have another repeat of 2019.
So now we're talking about snakes in the government.
Yeah. But don't say that about snakes. That's mean. Snakes are lovely.
Well, I mean, we're going to be talking about conservative Christians and their craziness. So we need to give a quick reminder for folks who are new. StreamYard has a stupid delay between me and Mero. You guys might not see it as much on your side, but we definitely experience it. And both of us have actually experimented with having conversations over like Discord and over WhatsApp versus having conversations over StreamYard. And the delay is definitively there. But also, Mero didn't get around to researching this particular topic because of how kind of breaking news it is. So I'm kind of leading the stream a little bit because I actually went and read most of that document. And yes, I know it's 920 pages, but I did because I'm both an idiot and a masochist. So if you see me cutting Mero off or vice versa, it's not being rude. It's actually caused by a techno glitch and asking favors for folks in the stream to remind each other of that if somebody gets upset about it in the future. Mero usually flags me somehow. Like we have a little private chat you guys can't see. She'll flag me if I do it too often because again, I'm not even like on my end it looks like she's stopped talking sometimes.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't realize it. So, yeah, that goes both ways, but it's more that I'm more likely to be interrupted because going through the portal, there's always a delay going through.
Well, and my computer's closer to the server.
Different dimension. Yeah, so and she's closer to the server. The server is in the real world. So.
So, this is also a reminder in terms of moderation because we have a new moderator on board. Rules are that folks, I know there's going to be folks who disagree with me politically in the chat, and that's fine. We can argue if you want to. I might respond to you, I might not. It's entirely your decision. However, disagreeing is fine as long as you're not insulting people, attacking trans people, or using slurs. If you insult me or Mero, if you misgender someone or start attacking trans people, or if you start insulting people in the chat, my mods will time you out the first time and they will ban you the second time, unless it's a slur, in which case you'll just get banned. Don't use slurs in my chat. Just don't. So with that in mind, chat, the same goes for you, regardless of political ideology. Don't be an asshole. And yes, I'm going to say that because it's not one of the no-no words. Don't be that person when you're arguing with people. We need to keep things as civil as humanly possible. We're going to be discussing some pretty high-level stuff and getting into a bit of history. I did actually call up an Italian friend to verify the details that I'm going to be reporting on for Italian fascism. But the thing is the focus is going to be on Italy and Mussolini for this stream and kind of comparisons between the two and how we can use fascism properly, and also why this document is pretty dang fascist. I'm going to avoid bringing up the Nazi Party and Hitler, because Hitler actually got most of his ideas from Mussolini in the first place. Like Lebensraum, the whole living space thing, Italy did that first.
And also, just another bit of housekeeping. This is going to be a lot more strict with time because I've got to go to work. So this will be an hour and a half max stream. So we might need to go and have a second stream as well a bit later in the future if as this story develops. Yep.
So, and also, I know that a lot of trans folks are very concerned about Project 2025 for very good reasons. That's not going to be the bulk of the focus of the stream, though. And that's not because, I'm against advocating for trans rights. Trans people should be very concerned about this. It's because I'm more concerned about the ways in which this document outlines a semi-pseudo-lawful way for the president to seize absolute power. So if trans folks are under threat now from violence where the police won't take care of you, the state could potentially seize power and do even worse things if the rest of this comes to pass. So we'll talk about the social provisions later, but I'm far more concerned in this stream with the fact that this is more or less 920 pages of how to subvert the democratic process and basically turn the presidency into a dictatorship. And that's kind of what our focus is going to be.
Yeah. So big pro-trans good space here.
Well, and anti-aliasing, I'm not saying don't argue with the fascists. I'm just saying don't be a dickhole about it.
Yeah. So here, as you know, if you're trans and not a dick, we are supportive of you. So lots of love to our trans and non-binary friends, and we will support you in your upcoming.
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, you should be the most concerned about these things, not just because the policies they want to enact, but because they could do much, much worse if they get the level of power that this document teaches them how to get.
Yeah. So I think that's more or less all of our housekeeping.
Yeah, I think so. So, first part, though, we need to talk a little bit about the rise of Italian fascism, because people like to throw the word fascist around a lot. And a lot of people mistake almost anything that's even slightly authoritarian for it. So we should probably talk a bit about what the ideological sort of groundwork was and how it came to be.
Yeah. Also, thank you, Ikeda, for the $20 super chat. Sorry, I can't think of anything funny right now. If you can think of anything funny right now, I would be very surprised. And Singham for the $2. I'm not entirely sure. SGD. I don't know what that is. He's hoping I can catch up with Ikeda.
Ikeda says Ishtar et al. Says trans rights.
Yep.
Dionysus also says trans rights.
Yep. I will be back in a tick.
All right. So, Mero has turned her camera off. So I'm going to get into a little bit, because Mero and I did review all of this beforehand. Let's talk a little bit about the fascist movement in Italy. Now, I'm going to preface this twice. The first is that I did talk to an Italian friend and got all the dates and everything double checked and kind of the storyline double checked. Number two, this is going to be a heavy simplification. There's going to be a few major events that are skipped, not to try to shape the argument in some way, shape, or form, but because there's a lot of history behind it, and I want to hit the major bullet points so that we can start getting into the Project 2025 document. So, in Italy in the late 1910s, early 1920s, people were afraid of a real, actual communist revolution due to recent movements in nearby countries and actual class-conscious revolts in Italy, because, let's face it, the Industrial Revolution, working conditions, they were not great. If you're familiar with Slaughterhouse-Five. So the Italian elites allied with Mussolini and the Fascist Party because, well, they were anti-communist. So, it was in their interest, or so they thought. The Fascist Party started as a small northern Italy movement, but it started allying itself with the far right, which expanded the movement to over 250,000 members by 1921. They formed militias that they called the Black Shirts, which occupied cities and terrorized officials considered against the interest of the movement. kind of like the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers or Stormfront or any of those, which their activities were largely ignored by the supportive police. Kind of like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the Stormfront.
And QAnon.
The Jungle. Sorry about that. So yeah, Jungle, not Slaughterhouse 5. Thank you for correcting me, Akeda. So their doctrine banned literature on birth control and increased penalties for abortion at the far right's urging, which both were declared crimes against the state and party doctrine once they seized power. This is later, but they campaigned on this. They also limited the rights of women to basically just being homemakers and mothers.
Yeah. Gee, that doesn't sound familiar. I can't think of anything happening in the US right now in regards to, banning abortion and going after contraception. And
so by 1922, they were so numerous that they began attacking socialist offices and the homes of socialist candidates, as well as violently occupying cities, which culminated in October of 1922, which they called the March on Rome, where they occupied several government buildings. Sounds familiar. Post offices. And yeah. The king, who liked Mussolini, ordered the army to stand down out of both fear of violence and also there was some love between them, so to speak. He meets with Mussolini and declares him prime minister due to this violent uprising. So Mussolini literally, it would be, imagine if January 6th actually succeeded.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people who are terribly politically engaged in the US realized how incredibly close your country was to collapsing after January 6th. I think a lot of people realize that it wasn't a good thing, but I don't think, if January 6th actually had succeeded, you'd be under a fascist dictatorship right now.
Oh, militant Mazdakite. So there's kind of a bad thing there too, though, because the fascists also outlawed any kind of reproductive rights type literature and anything involving contraception, like any kind of education involving that, which we'll see in the Project 2025 document the Republicans also want to do. So,
yeah. And also, if you want to look at things, look at Nicolae Ceausescu from Romania. He absolutely banned contraception completely in the 1980s, I think it was, and basically the country just started to collapse because there were a lot of people that couldn't afford children having them. So have a look if you're interested in Romanian history. Nicolae Ceausescu, I think it was in the 80s, I think, or maybe a bit earlier. He also banned any sort of contraception, and it caused a huge problem that they're still dealing with today.
So, coming back to our little bit of history lesson. So, when Mussolini became prime minister by royal decree, he initially pursued some more liberal looking policies while still ordering deep cuts to social services because there was still a multi party parliament. So, he didn't have absolute power yet. So, the fascists enacted the Acerbo law, which guaranteed a plurality of seats to any party that gets 25% of the vote or more, and then started using violent intimidation tactics via the black shirts to basically intimidate the populace into voting for them, which then won them a majority of the vote. At about this same time, at the end of 1924, early 1925, a prominent politician, Giacomo Matteotti, apologies to any Italians here if I'm mispronouncing names and stuff, was kidnapped and murdered by the fascists. And in January of 1925, Mussolini just took responsibility and declared he'd done nothing wrong, then dismissed the parliament. And effectively, the leftists in the country didn't fight back because they were disgusted by the fact that the leader basically said that he had okayed it, so they walked out. And so at that point, the next 4 years, fascism entrenched itself, censorship laws were enacted, departments and deputies that stood in opposition to Mussolini's goals and those of the party were either confined or exiled, and parliament became single party. So that's kind of where I'm going to stop the explanation. But when you talk about the path to power, if you notice, they were democratically elected, kind of.
And yeah, there's a couple of parallels happening right now in the US.
So what I mean by democratically elected is if you haven't noticed, like the Proud Boys, doing like the poll watching, for example, armed poll watching and things of that nature, those are literally some of the same tactics that were used.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, there's a lot of things happening in America right now is literally the same thing that's happened back then with Mussolini. Excuse me.
So now we need to talk a little bit about what Project 2025 is. What is Project 2025? Project 2025 is a 920-page manifesto put out by the Heritage Foundation, which, if you don't know that particular group, be glad. However, they are the shadowy super PAC, that think tank that is behind the majority of everything you hate about what the Republicans have done. If you are progressive at all, these are your enemies, basically.
Yeah.
They have like the puppet strings on the majority of the politicians. If you're a Republican, the ones you like. If you're anybody else, the ones you don't.
Yeah.
So they're kind of terrifying. And they put out a document that literally the first section is called Taking the Reins of Government. So this is an outline for if they get a president elected. This is an outline for the first 6 months in office for him.
Yeah.
Or her.
I'm just saying.
So let's face it, if you're talking about a Republican president, it's probably a him.
Yeah, they ripped the mask straight off. They also removed the skin, and now you've just got. I'll let your body, your brain, come to terms with what I was about to say. But yeah, the mask is well and truly ripped off.
So, like, I actually read the majority of this document. I read about 700 or so pages of it, so I haven't read the tail end of it yet. But I've read a good chunk of the middle and not skimmed. I actually read it. Now, another preface, we're not lawyers, but this isn't a legal document. This is a policy outline. And even if you have a even cursory education on how the American political system works, this document should scare you. Now, it is in the description of the live stream if you want to go open it in a new tab to follow along. I'm not going to be streaming it because it's technically a book, so I don't know if they're going to try to claim copyright on it, but I will be reading sections because that is fair use. So
and I cater with the $5 super chat. I just realized the scared face looks like the Ukrainian flag. Sadly appropriate. It's very scary.
So yeah, this is freely available and you can actually look at it. It's in the description. But the literal first section is called Taking the Reins of Government. And the argument that they present in this first section should scare the crap out of you. The argument that they make is that every single office in the executive branch of the government, including the Department of Justice, is there to serve the president's agenda, whether it is supposed to be bipartisan or independent or not, and that none of those branches are actually independent. And that even those officials that have jobs that should be protected in the instance where their will opposes that of the president, that the president, it outlines how to fire those people, more or less, even though they should be protected.
And also, just think to yourself, if the Democrats tried doing something like that, imagine how the Republicans would react. So I like to always think to myself, if something like this happens, how would the people who oppose these people would react? If a group of Democrats released a manifesto basically saying how to seize the reins of government, what would the Republicans do? They would throw a massive stink. And they should, honestly, anybody, I don't care. But just keep that in mind when you watch or see anything like that, because I know pointing out Republican hypocrisy is just basically like yelling at a brick wall, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. And that's how I...
sorry.
You go. Yep.
I was going to say another thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're talking about hypocrisy is that, like, when you think about fascism as an ideology, Italian fascism, it was grounded deeply in populism, but it was also grounded deeply. The only ideology of fascism was power. They would align with whatever political ideology helped them seize power. Now, typically, right wingers and conservatives, generally throughout history, have a tendency to be great man, sort of power hungry, like we will stand up and form the big red brick wall in the way of any sort of progress. So they're very easy to unite. So fascism has tended towards far right ideology for the majority of its existence. And it did so with Mussolini and the fascists as well, like the original fascists. However, like they repeatedly would shift their positions on various things based off of what would keep them power. And I want you guys to keep that in mind as we go through all of the ways that this document contradicts its own ideology in the changes that it wants to make in order to give the president even more power.
Yeah, and Black Hat makes a really good point. $10.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Black Hat.
It looks like $10 dues.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Black Hat. The fact that the document is that long in the first case is extremely suspicious. Seems like a way to slip shit through without bringing attention to it or make it so convoluted you don't look hard. And that is very, very true. That is absolutely true. That's one of the things that Jordan Peterson does. He says these incredible things. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's amazing and so profound and stuff. He doesn't say profound stuff. He just says large words quickly. But if you sit down and you break it apart, the stuff that he says is actually really, really concerning. And that's the sort of thing that's happening with this. They're saying a lot of words. They're very verbose because it just, people's brains just can't understand it. It doesn't break it down. You can't do anything. And who has time to read 900 pages apart from Ali?
I was about to say, well, I made time to read 900 pages because holy crap, this is scary.
Yeah. So I think maybe a lawyer might be interested in or something like that.
Which we are not.
I think if anybody knows who Leisha Miller is, she's a YouTuber in the US. She's a lawyer as well. She's kind of like a female legal. I think if anybody wants to go and contact her and go, hey, have you actually read this? I wouldn't be surprised if she's already doing a video or scripting a video for this, because
okay, but here's the scariest part.
Thing.
There's a couple people saying fluff is camouflage. There's not a lot of fluff in this, actually. There's a bit here and there. Like at the beginning of chapters, there's a little bit of fluff. But what's shocking is that a lot of this actually does outline genuine policy proposals and like actual step-by-step, this is how you break a democracy's back. Like, it is actually kind of scary how not fluffy the majority of this document actually is. There's a lot of hemming and hawing in the introduction, which is what most people are going to read about, like woke ideology and trans stuff and da-da-da. And that's why most people are yelling about that. But when you actually read the rest of it, it's actually terrifying just how concise and precise each and every one of these ideas are. They also say that this is just one branch of their plan. They also have what they call the Presidential Academy, which is they're literally taking Republican presidential candidates and training them how to implement this to break democracies back. They are also have a repository list that they will hand to the next Republican president that tells them, here's a whole bunch of names for officials from our project that you can appoint to start getting going on these goals day one in office.
And Ikeda, thank you for the $10 super chat. George Orwell said, ironically, there is no God but power. Religious leaders ought to be most opposed to this.
Oh, there's parts of this where they talk about the Bible and like how the Bible should actually be taken over like American law for defining marriage.
All right. Shall we continue on? Sorry for the detour.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for cutting you off there. It was just like I needed to say that because we haven't gotten there yet, and we're probably going to get there on the second stream. But like atheists and pagans, we both need to be very concerned about this. This is an allyship stream. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If America sneezes, the world catches cold. Like Trump spawned a whole bunch of fascist movements with his BS. And the thing is, this makes Trump look like an idiot. Like he's worse, but like this makes everything that he did look like child's play.
Yeah. This is a level of maliciousness that Trump never could have got there. This is malicious as fuck.
So I'm going to read a little section from the beginning. So for those of you following along, I'm on page 23, the White House office, in the second paragraph. With respect to the presidency, it is best to begin with our republic's foundational document. The Constitution gives the executive power to the president. It designates him as commander-in-chief and gives him the responsibility to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. It further prescribes that the president might seek the assistance of the principal officer in each of the executive departments. Beginning with George Washington, every president has been supported by some form of White House office consisting of direct staff officers as well as a cabinet comprised of department and agency heads. Since the inaugural administration of the late 18th century, citizens have chosen to devote both their time and their talent to defending and strengthening our nation by serving at the pleasure of the president. Now think about that phrasing for a second.
What page are we on, sorry?
Page 23. So we're in the section called the White House office. So we're looking at a little bit, because this is the foundation of their argument. They are arguing that the Constitution states that the entire executive branch serves at the pleasure of the president.
Yep.
So I'm going to finish the paragraph that I was reading. Their shared patriotic endeavor has proven to be a noble one, not in the least because the jobs in what is now known as the White House office are among the most demanding in all of government. The president must rely on the men and women appointed to the WHO. There simply are not enough hours in the day to manage the affairs of the state single-handedly, so delegation is just advisable. It's not just advisable, it's essential. The decisions and assistance that senior advisors make will directly impact the administration, its legacy, and most importantly, the fate of the country. Their agenda must therefore be the president's agenda. Choosing who will carry out that agenda on a daily basis is not only one of the first decisions a president makes in office, but also one of the most critical. The tone and tempo of administration are often determined on January 20th.
I'm still trying to find it. Is it on page 55?
No. It's like, yeah, it's page 55 of 920, but it's the page that says 23 at the bottom of the page.
Okay, right. Sorry, I was clicked to page 23 on the thingy, and it's sort of like, I can't see what you're saying. Yeah. So
let's talk a little bit about the obfuscation that's kind of going on here. For those of you who don't know, in America, the executive branch of the government is not just the president anymore. It hasn't been for a long time, as they outline. However, there aren't just presidential appointees in charge of it. There are also a number of career politicians whose job it is to make sure that the government stays stable when there's transitions between administrations. The argument that they're making here, more or less, is that all of those people should be beholden just to the president's will.
Yep. $10 black hat super chat. The thing with that is, if it is pushing multiple policies, it makes it way harder to push back against that point. You need to fight against multiple policies, and then some will just slip through anyway. So basically, it's the Gish Gallop of policies.
Yeah, it is. And the thing that's a problem, though, is that the section before more or less lays out that the issue that Trump ran into, which they don't say his name, but they say the issue, like in America right now, is that currently there is too much independence in the executive branch. So when the president wants to do something, when he says jump, there are some people who will not say how high, which, if you want stability in government, is actually a good thing. But they want to eliminate that. And that's the entire purpose of this document, is how can the president purge people who are supposed to have job protection so that he can get exactly what he wants.
Yeah. That is scary AF. Thank you, Skylar Taliesin. So glad I caught the stream live. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Widespread awareness and understanding is vital for us to fight back. That is very true.
Absolutely. This is why we have this live show, actually, because we teach science together, but we also cover politics, because what is allyship if like we have nothing to ally against, right?
Yeah.
Like pagans and atheists, we both have every reason to be terrified of this, because they want to like establish biblical rule of law, and we will get into that later.
Yeah, maybe next couple of weeks. not this week. Yeah. So I've lost my train of thought. Ali, if you wanted to keep going.
Okay, so basically, like, they go over a whole bunch of different in this chapter, they go over a whole bunch of different offices and like what is within the presidential cabinet. And like obviously, to a certain degree, there's not as much that's as huge of a problem in that first section. It's when you start getting into when they start talking about some of the other agencies that are supposed to have a level of independence, particularly the Federal Election Commission, the Department of Education, the Department of Homeland Security and Defense, and anything involving the budget. For one
Yeah.
thing, they want to bring back PAYGO, which, for those of you who don't know, the pay as you go rule literally states that congressional legislation, if there's going to be any entitlement program, it is required to reduce, like to either increase revenues or reduce some other spending in order to not expand the deficit,
Yeah.
which is basically career suicide, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Because for those of you who don't know, government debt doesn't work the same way that like personal debt does. Government debt basically means that like other countries and businesses and stuff hold bonds. And expanding the amount of bonds they're willing to sell is kind of it, like it's part of how you stop countries from going to war with each other, for one thing, because like, well, if you've got a bunch of debt with this country and then you go and you try to kill them, well, you're not getting your money back.
Yeah.
Like that bond is only as secure as the country that's holding it. So like inter-country debt can be kind of a tool to help maintain peace in a lot of ways, but it's also way more complex than just the government borrowed a bunch of money.
Yeah. And also having what obviously the undercurrent, like what they're trying to do is stop things like disability support, like if you're out of work. So they want to cut all of that. And the moment you start cutting social programs is the moment your country starts to fall apart. Having more money in the plebs, the back pocket of the plebs, is you're more likely to have a peaceful society. That's why Scandinavian countries are often touted to be the most happiest and most stable countries in the world, is because they've got a really, really strong social network. And even for me, like I work in disability, so and my industry is like the third largest employer in Australia. So if we stopped putting money towards the care industry, so aged care, disability, that sort of stuff, that means the third largest employer, everyone that loses their job. And so it's sort of if I lose my job, what's going to happen? Like there's like having no social security, no social backup for people is actually country suicide. And what they're obviously trying to say is that if you can't get a job, too bad, too sad, you're going to you're on your own. That's what I'm reading in this. I don't know if anybody would disagree or agree with me on that one, but that's what I'm seeing.
So, and here is the next piece. Like, they are attempting to effectively rein in what they call rogue agencies. That includes the Federal Election Commission, which, I wonder if there's a recent event that might make them very interested in seizing a lot more power with the Federal Election Commission.
I don't know. By the way, does everyone like my very appropriate mug? Because it's after half an hour.
Yep, the spice can flow.
Fuck, fuckity, fuck. Yeah. So I just want to catch up on some super chats. Ikeda, we should eliminate the debt ceiling and the glass ceiling. I don't have any comment on that. If you've got one,
That I don't. I have no comment on that.
yes. So yes, I just thought this was an appropriate mug for today.
So jumping down to the page number is 893 of 920, but it's page 861 at the bottom on the Federal Election Commission.
Okay, so what number is it? Sorry.
So for on the PDF document, it should be 893, but at the bottom, it's going to say page 861. It's the Federal Election Commission section. This is one of the things that has me the most concerned. So I will read the mission overview section, and then we're going to get into what they call the needed reforms. So here's how they set up their argument.
Do you want me to read it instead?
Sure, go ahead.
You have a break? Yep. So the Federal Election Commission, or the FEC, is an independent federal agency that began operations in 1975 to enforce the Federal Election Campaign Act, or FECA, passed by Congress in 1971 and amended in 1974. FECA governs the raising and spending of funds in all federal campaigns for Congress and the presidency. The FEC has no authority over the administration of federal elections, which is performed by the state governments. While the FEC has exclusive civil enforcement authority over FECA, the US Justice Department has criminal enforcement authority, which is defined as a knowing and willful violation of the law. Because the FEC is an independent agency and not a division or office directly within the executive branch, the authority of the president over the actions of the FEC is extremely limited. As former FEC Commissioner Bradley Smith has said, the FEC's regulation of campaign finance deeply implicates the First Amendment principles of free speech and association. The FEC regulates in one of the most sensitive areas of the Bill of Rights, political speech and political activity by citizens, candidates, political parties, and the voluntary membership organizations that represent Americans who share common views on a huge range of important and vital public policy issues.
So, and then they get into the needed reforms. So at present, the president has nomination authority. And basically what that means, there's 6 people in the body of the FEC. They're supposed to have term limits. Quite often, that's not how it works in practice. Quite often, the president will just kind of leave them alone if they want to keep serving their term. However, they have the option, if their term is up, to just appoint new ones. And the nomination has to be approved by Congress. Typically, I think it's the Senate. So basically, what this means is that, kind of like what happened with the Supreme Court, 5 of those seats are either set to expire during the next presidency, or they've already expired and we just don't have anybody new in the office. Which means that the next president has the ability, if they actually stop and think about it, to majorly screw with this agency. And what's bad about that is, even though it's got a half and half, they talk a little bit about some of the things they want. So we're going to scroll down to page, 2 more pages, down to 863, where we've got some stuff outlined in bold. They say the president assuming office in 2025 must ensure, if the 3 Republican commissioners do not wish to remain on the FEC past their terms, the nominees for these positions share the views of these commissioners. Also, to the extent that the president has the ability to negotiate with the Democratic Party leader in the Senate, he should try to temper any choice of the opposition party to ensure that this individual does not have extreme views on aggressive over-enforcement that would severely restrict political speech and protected party campaign and associational activities. Now, that sounds reasonable until you realize what the FECA is. The FECA is the money in politics law. It's the thing that limits the amount an individual can donate to a political campaign, the amount that an individual person running a campaign can use of their own money. It's the thing that was supposed to protect us from super PACs. So they're basically stating, oh, well, they really got to make sure that whoever gets put there doesn't really mind crap loads of money just getting spent under your nose.
Yeah. Gargamel Gold Project 2025 needs to be stopped. It is pure evil. So much for Republicans caring about the Constitution. They've never cared about the Constitution. Well, they might have, prior to the Southern strategy, but other than that, they've never, even me as an Australian with very basic understanding of American historical politics, political history. Oh, sorry. Even I know that they don't care about the Constitution. All they care about is being in power, which is just so scary. It's so scary as an Australian, because I know that
So
when
here's where we get scarier though. Like we haven't even
Mm.
gotten to the scary part yet.
No, no, we
So
have
we've
not.
we've just got okay, you should exercise your appointing capabilities. All right. There's 5 offices up. That's okay. U.S. Department of Justice FEC related activities. The president does have control over the Department of Justice. Thus, he has the authority as president, primarily through his choice of attorney general and other political appointees, to direct the prosecutorial functions of the DOJ regarding criminal enforcement of the FECA. Such investigations and prosecutions are carried out by the Public Integrity Section of the Criminal Division with the assistance, coordination, and help of the offices of U.S. attorneys on whatever state an alleged violation occurs. The president must ensure that the DOJ, just like the FEC, is directed to only prosecute clear violations of the FECA. The department must not construe ambiguous provisions against the public instead of the government or apply FECA in a way that infringes on protected First Amendment activity.
Yes, but who makes the decision if it's ambiguous or not?
Well, we're about to get to that actually,
Yeah,
because they want to
exactly.
hamstring the Justice Department in enforcing these campaign finance laws. The president should direct the DOJ and the attorney general not to prosecute individuals under an interpretation of the law which the FEC, the expert agency designated by Congress to enforce the law civilly and issue regulations establishing the standards under which the law is applied, does not agree. In making prosecution decisions, the DOJ should be instructed to consult and consider all official decisions by the FEC that interpret the law, including prior enforcement actions, regulatory pronouncements, and advisory opinions, just as private practitioners, the public, and political actors do. It is fundamentally unfair to the DOJ to prosecute an individual for supposedly violating the law when the FEC has previously determined that similar situationed individual has not violated the law. Furthermore, this rule should apply even when there's a tied or 3-3 vote by FEC commissioners, whether an enforcement action or an advisory opinion, since under the statute, the FEC cannot take any action unless there are 4 affirmative votes.
Okay, can you break that down for somebody who has literally no idea what you're talking about? And before you do that, Ikedas Hakubi says, I think Teddy Roosevelt was the last good Republican. Okay, sorry. Thank you for the $5 super chat, Ikeda.
So here's the issue. Remember when we went over earlier that there are 6 positions and there's no more than 3 allowed to be from one party. So you have 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. So if a Republican violates the campaign finance law, do you think any of the Republicans are going to vote to allow for a prosecution if the FEC is now the agency that has to decide that, not the Department of Justice?
Yeah.
I mean, even vice versa with the Democrats.
Yep. Yeah, so it's just going to be at best a stalemate. At worst, the Republicans are just going to keep doing. Yeah.
Melismos, $10 super chat.
The threat with things like this is the average person doesn't care until it directly affects their day-to-day. Most of the citizens of Nazi Germany ignored evil as they were well cared for by Hitler. And thank you for your first super chat, by the way.
I don't actually think that's entirely true. There were a lot of people who rebelled and they just got killed.
Yeah. And as you said at the beginning, and this is not me being cranky at you, Melissa Moss, is that we're going to try and keep away from Nazi Germany because we don't want to invoke Godwin's law.
Well, that and the blood and soil thing's a little bit different than what we're looking at here. We're looking at something that's far more akin to fascist Italy. And to be honest, I think it's a much more interesting comparison considering Hitler got his playbook from Mussolini.
Yeah.
Like, again, even the whole, like, living room thing was originally, like, that was a fascist precept that was put forward by the fascist party in Italy.
The living room thing?
Lebensraum, the entire basis for World War II. When Hitler started invading people, his whole thing was like, Germany got screwed over in World War I, and so we need more space because we're a growing country. And so he started attacking his neighbors. That precept actually came from Italy, their idea of living room when they started attacking Greece.
Oh, okay. All right.
So this is scary. This is really scary.
Yeah.
It
So,
says, they say, again, it seems obvious that if the commissioners designated by Congress to interpret laws are unable to determine what the law it requires, then it's unfair to prosecute a citizen for violating that law. The DOJ should not engage in criminal prosecutions that stretch legal theories and defy FEC interpretations and regulations. But last I checked, the Department of Justice is run by lawyers.
yeah.
The FEC might not be. The FEC is run by appointment, whoever Congress and the president put up.
Yeah.
They're not prosecutorial specialists. That's not what they do.
Yeah. And also, like, the DOJ should not engage in criminal prosecutions that stretch legal theories. So, let's say they put a cap that you're only allowed to donate $10,000 to a particular party. Then, if someone donates $9,999 and today and tomorrow does another $9,999, I mean, obviously they're violating that law, but because they're underneath, they can go, oh, but you're allowed to donate more than once, and they blah blah blah.
And of
Then
course, like if the FEC is deciding, you've got to split 3-3. So half of them are going to be in their best interest to vote for that person to be prosecuted and the other half against. And because it's required by law for obvious reasons for this to be split, well, they're saying that if there's a split vote, there should be a policy in place that the DOJ, which is tasked with enforcing federal law, can't act on it.
Yeah, it is very, very scary. Like, that's the whole reason why you need to have an oversight committee, because it's just instantaneously, like anyone, even a 2-year-old can go, hey, won't this be corrupt as anything? Like, when, like, perfect example of how power can cause people to be completely stupid. Like, when I was about 10 years old, I heard about trickle down economics, and the first thing I thought was like, wait, that doesn't work. That wouldn't work. Like, a very a person's just going to get richer and richer, and they're not going to pass on the savings onto the people below. And everyone's like, oh, no, it works. It doesn't work. If a 10-year-old can see that, I mean, a 3-year-old can see that as well. But yeah, it's very scary. It's very scary, because anyone with half a brain cell can see how this is going to be very open to corruption. But I think they don't care. It's not that they don't think that we can't see it. It's just that they don't care that we can. This is going to do it anyway. I don't think they're trying to insult their intelligence. I just think they just don't. They're quite ambivalent to it, which I don't know what's more scary. Like, I don't know if it's more scary that they think that we're stupid enough to understand and not understand what they're trying to say, or if they know that we're smart enough to understand what they're trying to do and they just don't give a shit anyway. I don't know what your thoughts on that one is.
It's messed up.
It's very messed up.
So there's another bit of bitterness here that's very clearly tied back to January 6th and the last administration and the Cheeto Brigade. So they talk about how the FEC has their own legal team to defend themselves, which is pretty significant because the Department of Justice actually does both the prosecution for most federal offenses and also the defense of a federal department that gets sued by somebody who is not from the federal government. So, like, they have both prosecutorial authority for federal crimes, and they also defend the federal government when it gets sued.
Okay, whereabouts are you looking?
It's the same page 864/896. So this is like the same thing, like just below those bolded points.
Okay, so you're looking right at the bottom of the 864. Okay.
Yep. And the FEC actually is one of the few departments that has their own legal team because it's supposed to be independent from the executive branch. There's very good reason for this. Because if they get sued, the Department of Justice might have a conflict of interest if, for example, they're getting sued over a decision regarding, something that people disagree with regarding a recent election. So The problem is that there's a 3 and 3, as we said, and thereby a policy must be passed by vote for the FEC to defend themselves. And recently, they got sued over BS regarding January 6th and their refusal to do anything about it. And the Democrats basically filibustered, more or less. They refused to vote on it. So the department wasn't allowed to defend itself. So the suit defaulted, which is a good thing, mind you, because it was a just suit. But the Republicans are pissed about it. So we get a few more bolded statements on this page 864/896 of the PDF. The president should direct the attorney general to defend the FEC in all litigation when there's a failure of the commissioners to authorize the general counsel of the agency to defend it. Now remember, the Department of Justice is under the authority of who?
Who? I don't know.
The president. He appoints the attorney general.
Yeah. So what does this mean?
Basically, what this means is that they would force the Department of Justice, which, if you remember, when this happened, would have been under Trump, to defend the lawsuit against the FEC.
Yeah.
Which means that in cases where there's a split decision about whether or not the FEC is in the wrong, and and half of it filibusters, now we have a partisan area that may be defending them. As legislative matter, given this abuse, the president should seriously consider recommending that Congress amend the FECA to remove the agency's independent litigating authority and rely on the Department of Justice to handle all litigation involving the FEC.
So basically, they're just going to appoint someone to defend the to force the FEC to do whatever they want to do. Basically, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not good. You need to have an independent. You need to have an independent group to ensure that power doesn't get bad. That makes sense. So basically, they're removing all of the teeth from the FEC.
Yeah. More or less.
Yeah.
The president should vigorously oppose all efforts as proposed, for example, in Section 6002 for the People Act of 2021 to change the structure of the FEC to reduce the number of commissioners from 6 to 5 or some other odd number.
Yeah, and what they're going to do is fill that the odd number with a majority Republican.
Well, what they're saying is that actually they want it to basically not be able to do that, because currently a deadlock is to their favor, because typically it's not the Democrats violating campaign finance laws.
Oh, yeah, but why would they even bother with campaign finance laws if they can just get rid of the campaign finance laws to begin with? Which is what they're trying to bloody do in this.
Here's another one. Raise contribution limits and index reporting requirements to inflation. Contribution limits should generally be much higher, as they hamstring candidates and parties while serving no practical anti-corruption purpose, as a wide range of reporting requirements have not been indexed to inflation. Clogging the public record in the FEC's internal processes with small dollar information is of little use to the public.
Okay.
If you make that argument for minimum wage, what happens?
Oh, but we can't do this. It's evil. Socialism.
So, they want to cut the teeth out of the FEC and make it beholden to the Department of Justice, which historically the Department of Justice has been seen as neutral, but it's becoming more and more partisan. And they are right about that. There are some things in here where I'm reading through this and I'm like, yeah, there is actually truth. There's bloat and bureaucracy, and there's a lot of unelected people who have a lot of power, but at the same time, a popularity contest isn't always the best way to decide who's the best person for the job when it comes to things like, for example, apportioning funds in a block grant.
Yeah.
So, there are some anti-democratic things, but as is often the case, people are often very good at figuring out a problem without necessarily being great at figuring out a solution.
Yeah.
And the solutions in this are horrendous.
And when the solution is offered, people start getting shitty at you. this is happening. Okay, well, here's how you fix it. Socialism.
So now we get to the Department of Education, which we're going to be going back. Page 351 of the PDF, 319 is going to be what it says at the bottom. Department of Education. I'm going to read the mission section. But this is pretty scary.
Do you want me to do
go
that?
Ahead.
Federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately the Federal Department of Education should be eliminated. What the far out?
Keep going.
When power is exercised, it should empower students and families, not government. Jesus Christ. In our pluralistic society, families and students should be free to choose from a diverse set. Sorry. This is the first time I've been reading this.
Okay. You're welcome. We're not even at the worst parts yet, but these are some of the things that should be scary, because this is where we're starting to get into some of the trans issues. Trigger warning, by the way, if you guys don't want to deal with anti-trans stuff, we're going to be talking about some of that. But there's stuff in here where they want to reclass talking about trans people as pornography, and they also want an executive order federally banning pornography.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to continue, and I'm also looking at this, like, in our pluralistic society, family and students should be free to choose from a diverse set of school options. We know this is going to be creationism. They're going to kick evolution out of it.
It's not even just that. Like, it's worse than that. Private schools are bad for students that go to them, not just because the for-profit thing. Even if it's a good quality school, they create a class-striated society where rich kids never have to interact with people outside of their class.
Yeah. So diverse set of school options and learning environments that best fit their needs. Our post-secondary institutions should also reflect such diversity, with room for not only traditional liberal arts colleges and research universities, but also faith-based institutions, career schools, military academies, and lifelong learning programs.
So atheists, allies, here's where your ears should be perking up. I promised you guys that we would be getting into the Christianity. We're getting into the Christianity. They want to make Christianity federally sponsored and paid for with federal funds.
Yeah.
Keep going. We're not done with the mission section yet.
Elementary and secondary education policy should follow the path outlined by Milton Friedman in 1955. I know that name. I have a feeling that they were not a particularly good person, wherein education is publicly funded, but education decisions are made by families. Holy fuck. This is so bad. Ultimately, every parent should have the option to direct his or her child's of education funding through an education savings account funded overwhelmingly by state and local taxpayers, which would empower parents to choose a set of education options that meet their child's unique needs. That's so bad. Okay, all right. The reason why, and I'm pretty sure most of you would know this, parents aren't educators. A lot of parents work in random places, like your local grocery
vouchers.
shop or whatever. They're not doctors, they're not scientists, they're not educators. The vast majority of parents do not have the education requirements to be able to give students the proper needs, to be able to fulfill their proper needs. So we're going to be seeing kids that come out of high school who don't even know that calculus exists. You're going to have kids coming out of high school who think that creationism is the right thing and evolution isn't real. You're going to have kids that think that you can if you have sex, like unprotected sex, you just squirt coke up your vagina and you're not going to get pregnant. You're going to have shit like that. And one of the tenets of fascism is to attack education. Some of the first people that were attacked by fascist dictatorships and things like that were the educated people. Like, this is really scary as a person who is with a science degree, who's really interested in education.
It gets
Like, I
worse.
love teaching.
It
And
gets
this
it
is
gets worse. It gets worse. Keep going, Marrow. It gets worse.
okay.
You need to finish the whole mission section before you get to fully comment, because it gets so much worse. Like, I'm not trying to just stop your rants. Like, I'm not trying to be a butt here.
It's
I cut you off deliberately because the ending bit is going to make you lose your freaking mind.
okay. States are eager to lead in K-12 education. For decades, they have acted independently of the federal government to pioneer a variety of constructive reforms and school choice programs. For example, in 2011, Arizona first piloted ESAs, which provide families roughly 90% of what the state would have spent on that child in public schools to be used instead of education options such as private school tuition, online courses, and tutoring. In 2022, Arizona expanded the program to be available to all families. The future of education freedom and reform in the states is bright and will shine brighter when regulations and red tape from Washington are eliminated. Oh my God.
Keep going.
Sometimes, and I know this sounds crazy, but red tape often, there's a reason for red tape a lot of the time. And that's okay.
Hey, can I before you finish your sentence, can I get a show of hands in the chat? How many of you have ever in your life taken out a student loan? And of that, put a red angry face emoji next to your hand emoji if it was a private one, as opposed to just a federal one.
Yeah.
Then I want you to keep going, Meryl.
Okay, Zernicke makes a good point. Online courses like freaking PragerU.
Yep.
Probably, actually. Probably. Yep. Skylar Tallison is waving their hand.
Yeah, we'll just let them post in the chat. We'll see
Yep.
how many people have dealt with this, because when you read that last paragraph, you'll see why I'm asking.
Okay. Federal money is inevitably accompanied by rules and regulations. Of course they are, that keep the influx of funds from having much, if any, impact on student outcomes.
That's an
Okay.
argument.
It raises the cost of education without raising student achievement. To the extent that federal taxpayer dollars is using to fund education programs, these funds should be granted to states without strings, eliminating the need for many federal and state bureaucrats. Eventually, policymaking and funding should take place at the state and local level, closest to the affected families. What if you live in a southern state and they're trying, and this going CRT?
That's actually no, that's even worse. We'll talk about redlining and why that's a problem in a minute. Get to the last paragraph.
Okay, is that? Oh, okay.
Read that first sentence and you'll see why I asked that question.
Although student loans and grants should ultimately be restored to the private sector, or at the very least, the federal government should revisit its role as guarantor rather than direct lender. Federal post-secondary education investments should bolster economic growth, and recipient institutions should nourish academic freedom and embrace intellectual diversity. Okay, that's... Oh my God. So the reason why I'm going, oh my God, this is bad, is even though it sounds on the surface, oh yeah, we should nourish academic freedom and embrace intellectual diversity. What that means is that nourish academic freedom is allowing academics...
Unethical experimentation, for one thing.
Yeah, they allow academics to be able to publish things saying this particular drug works very well on heart failure, whatever, and they don't have to say that they are the ones developing that drug. Like, they don't that academic freedom is important, but if you're going to start going to the point of saying that climate change is not real, and there is a person in Australia, they were censured by the university that they worked with because they were constantly speaking out against climate anthropogenic climate change, and he was a physicist or something like that. I can't remember his name, but he is But yeah, he was censured by the university because the stuff that he was saying was bringing the name of the university down. So he yeah, wow, that's so in academic freedom there is really important, but there needs to be, like everything, rules surrounding it, and then pushing things that aren't real and then screaming, oh, my academic freedom. Like, no, there's it's like free speech is great, but there needs to be rules surrounding it. And also embrace intellectual diversity. It's the same thing. Like, okay, being diverse is great, but you can't have a physics major talking about biology, kind of thing. Like, you can't have a person who was a physicist talking about bullcrap
You haven't
in
even
regards
finished
to
that
biology.
paragraph yet.
Oh, sorry, I will continue. That has not, however, been the track record of federal higher education policy or the many institutions of higher education that are hostile to free expression, open academic inquiry, and American exceptionalism. Okay. Federal post-secondary policy should be more than massive, inefficient, and open-ended subsidies to traditional colleges and universities. It should be rebalanced to focus far more on bolstering the workforce skills of Americans who have no interest in pursuing a 4-year academic degree. It should reflect a fuller picture of learning after high school, placing apprenticeships programs of all types and career and technical education on an even playing field with degrees from colleges and universities, rather than continuing to buttress a higher education establishment captured by woke diversicrats and a de facto monopoly enforced by the federal accreditation cartel. Federal post-secondary education policy should prepare students for jobs in the dynamic economy, nurture institutional diversity, and expose schools to greater market forces. Fuck me dead.
All right. Now you get to have your opinion, Marrow. Go off.
Gee, this is holy shit. Buttress a higher education established captured by woke diversicrats.
Don't even
Like,
fixate on that. The accreditation cartel. Marrow, why is accreditation important?
because you're not publishing bullshit.
Well, I'm talking about accreditation as in, like, you have to get accredited as a college for your degree to count for most jobs. Why is that? Well, because there are standards for accreditation on a national level. One of the reasons why most private colleges that are scams are not accredited is because they're scams. Like, their quality of education can't meet the standards that is required. So if
Yeah.
you get a psychiatry degree from Mum's Online University and you watched 10 videos, they're arguing that that YouTube pseudo course that you paid $10,000 for should be equivalent to a 4-year degree from a college.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's no standards, there's no quality assurance. There's yeah, like, it's really, really important, incredibly important to have like, if just coming from a scientific point of view, if I went to mums.net in regards to vaccines, like, let's say I wanted to do a course in immunology, um
And
those
you went
people
to
are like,
Mum's
I've
Online
done my
College.
research. You can't say you haven't been taught how to read a scientific journal. You haven't been taught what 90% of the words mean. Oh my god. Okay,
Well, and the
Akeda.
worst part is there are diploma mills that currently exist. In fact, when you are reading a paper, one of the reasons why it's so hard to get a paper published if you're not with a university or with a big private company that's got the money to get it put in for the peer review process is because of the fact that there are diploma mills that exist that are not accredited, but will just, you pay $100, they'll mail you a diploma and say
Yeah,
you don't even have to take the 10 YouTube course. They'll just
yeah,
send it to you. These guys are arguing for dismantling accreditation. So mills like that, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. between a diploma mill and an actual college.
Jesus Christ. Ikeda Hakubi says they are comfortable using the language of progressives as long as they get to define the meanings of words. That is true. Yeah, it's holy shit. Yeah, but the fact that it's like they're using woke, the word term woke, accreditation, cartel, yeah, so federal post-secondary education policy should prepare students for the jobs in the dynamic economy, which, I mean, isn't that the whole point of getting a fucking education?
Oh, but it gets even worse because there's a part that actually applies directly to me. So if you scroll down to the next page, or if you scroll down about 2 more pages, so you go past overview to the part where it says 322 on the bottom, you start getting all these bold, right? The second
Yeah.
bullet point there, providing for education of federal children. Congress has a special responsibility to children who are connected to military families who live in the District of Columbia or who are members of sovereign tribes. Responsibility for serving these students should be housed in the agencies that are already serving their families.
Can
As an
you
indigenous person, no, it fucking shouldn't. The last time you put education in the hands of the BIA, what the hell happened to us? We are still digging up those bodies.
Jesus.
We are still digging up those bodies. They explicitly mention sovereign tribes there. Oh yeah, the tribes are sovereign, but the federal government should set the federal government should send the BIA in, and they get to choose the schools for these families.
Yep. And what's going to happen to those kids?
I mean, what kids were still digging up the bodies?
Yeah. This is insane. Like, if we go up to so we're on 354 of 920 on the PDF for anybody who's following. Advancing education freedom, empowering families to choose among a diverse set of education options is key to reform and improved outcomes, and it can be achieved without establishing a new federal program. For example, portability of existing federal education spending to fund families directly, or allowing federal tax credits to encourage voluntary contributions to K-12 education savings account managed by charitable nonprofits could significantly advance education choice. I know this sounds...
They're arguing to dismantle the federal block grants that are currently the majority of funding that schools receive. So
Yep.
This is where you can have your opinion, and then we need to talk about redlining and why this policy will disproportionately hurt pretty much the majority of people listening to the stream, because I have a pretty like black and brown and red audience. I also have a pretty lower class audience, and most of us live in neighborhoods that are historically considered not great.
Yeah. So, well, my biggest concern is diverse set of education options. So I'm not against having education options because, as a person who is a neurotypical, as a person who works in disabilities, it is important that we have education options that is targeted towards people and kids who have a disability. But this isn't what they're talking about. They are absolutely talking about
They're talking about
allowing...
striating this stuff by class.
Yeah, this is class. And not only that, this is also this would have to be religious as well. And having people who
And they think religious schools should get federal funding money, same as everything else.
Yep, that's bullshit. It's... Oh, all right. Do you want to talk about redlining?
Let's talk about redlining. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, we are going to have a crash course in civics. The majority of funding that doesn't come from the federal government comes from property taxes here in the States. Your schools are funded by property owners. Redlining is historically a way in which Black and brown people in particular, but immigrant communities of all kinds as well, and the poor were sectioned off from society. Redline was a literal term where banks had neighborhoods outlined in red where they would not give loans to people Black and brown people to buy homes.
Yeah. So,
And they
and
would also
I,
direct white buyers from buying homes in those places.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
what's crazy is they abolished redlining later on in American history for obvious reasons. Separate but equal didn't work. It was never equal.
yeah,
But if you look at historical black and brown neighborhoods and the poorest neighborhoods in most cities, those policies still echo to today. And the thing is, if you're talking about property taxes and you live in a historically redlined neighborhood, how much do you think those houses are worth if they're primarily inhabited by the lower class? And if you're funding your school with property taxes, how much money do you think that school is getting
yeah.
in those
Bugger all.
neighborhoods compared to the school that's in the richy rich neighborhood? And I
Yeah,
have personal experience with this because I lived in a poor apartment in a very rich area. My elementary school, my first one, because I went to two, just one for the 1 year after we moved, had a rock climbing wall and a pull out gym and unicycles and like ceiling lights in the gym. We were building robots and like using connects and doing Mensa puzzles. They taught us how to budget. Like we were able to put on a play and had like method acting stuff in an elementary school. We
yeah,
competed in robotics competitions in an elementary school.
yeah,
Compare that to when we moved to another city where our textbooks were 10 years out of date.
yeah,
I have direct experience with a foot on either side of the poverty line, and the difference between these two was that I was the poor kid in the rich school. Several of my classmates had private beaches behind their houses.
Jesus
The
Christ.
quality of the school, you could see the difference. I have direct experience with it.
Yeah. And it never made any sense to me, growing up as a kid when I first heard about it. I thought to myself, um, it's that I thought to myself, like, shouldn't you be giving, like, inversing the money? So if it's the wealthy loan area, you give the money, less money to the school, and if you're in a poorer area of the country, you give more money to the school, like, because that makes sense. And now I understand it was just racism. It's just racism. um, if we go down a little bit, it says treating taxpayers like investors in federal student aid. A more educated populace is one that, like, the more educated a populace is, the better outcomes all throughout the country. Even if a person just finishes finishes high school and goes
Did
off
you
and does
actually
something else.
did you actually finish that paragraph? Read the whole paragraph
Oh,
there
okay.
because their entire philosophy behind that's worse.
Okay, taxpayers should expect their investment in higher education to generate economic productivity. When the federal government lends money to individuals for post-secondary education, taxpayers should expect those borrowers to repay. You're literally just making wealthy people wealthier. You're literally just making wealthy people wealthier. But it's one of those things, in regards to universal education, is what if the cure for cancer is locked up in the brain of a illegitimate, not illiterate person. But if you can't read or write, but what if this person is, like, stupidly smart? Like, education benefits everyone. Like, this is just one of those things that, study after study after study, the more educated a populace is, the better off the entire country is.
I mean,
Um,
it's even worse than that though, because they're dehumanizing the populace. They're talking about like they're literally talking about this in human resources terms. Like they're talking about as though education is meant specifically to produce economic benefit. Who gets the economic benefit? Because the taxpayers aren't getting the economic benefit, quote unquote. It's the people who own the companies they work for. An
yeah,
educated populace is better for the populace. It's not better for the rich.
yeah.
Oh, but it's
Uh,
even worse because Title I funding,
mm,
which is Native American students, We need to talk about that. Because what they want to do to us is messed up. So page 325/358 of the PDF.
25 just going down. All right. Which one do you want me? Do you want me to read the program and office prioritization within the department? Is that right at the end?
Yep. Start. So like read through the bolded points there.
Oh gosh. So I might move this. Do just above it. The Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, or OESE, or I'll say OC, because that's easier to say. The OC is comprised of 36 programs ranging from Title I Part A of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and Impact Aid to programs for Native American students and the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. Reduce the number of programs managed by the OC and transfer some of the remaining programs to other federal agencies. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Transfer Title I Part A, which provides the federal funding for lower income school districts, to the Department of Health and Human Services, specifically the Administration of for Children and Families. It should be administered as a no strings attached formula block grant. Restore revenue responsibility for Title I funding to the states over a 10-year period. I don't know much.
Think about that. Remember what I just told you about how education is paid for on a state level. Put 2 and 2 together.
Pardon?
I said put 2 and 2 together with that.
So basically, for poorer states, they can't give more money to Indigenous
Not
people.
just poorer states, it's poorer neighborhoods. Because remember, it's property taxes for the district in which those houses are located. That's not even a state level. It's property taxes in the neighborhoods on a neighborhood level. But it gets worse. Keep going.
OC also currently manages the Federal Impact Aid Program, which provides funding to school districts to compensate for reductions in property tax values, revenue due to the presence of federal property, such as that associated with the military base or tribal lands. Eliminate impact aid not tied to students. Move student-driven impact aid programs to the Department of Defense Education Authority, or DODEA, or the Department of Interior Bureaus of Indian Education. Why do they even still call it Indian? That's not cool.
That's what they call us.
Fucking hell. I'm just going to, if you hear me say Indigenous, I'm replacing it, the other word, because it's bullshit. Transfer all Indigenous education programs to the Bureau of Indigenous Education. The DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, which provides vouchers to low-income children living in the nation's capital, appropriate as DC, and is under the jurisdiction of Congress, should be expanded into a universal program, formula funded, and moved to the Department of Health and Human Services. All of the programs at OC should be block granted or eliminated. So I'm not.
This is mostly your low-income programs. And remember what I just said about how the federal government's block grants make up for as much of the funding as is allowed per the student populace for what you can't get from the states. So, like, poor area schools rely almost exclusively on federal funding.
And so they're just trying to get rid of that.
Yeah. And they do want to get rid of Pell Grants, yes, because Pell Grants are one of the programs run through OC.
$5 super chat from Arcada. Lol, India doesn't call itself India anymore. What else? What does it call itself?
Yes, Victoria, they did suggest funding tribals through schools through CPS, which, if you guys remember anything about the reservation school stream and the Texas Indigenous Erasure stream, CPS is historically not great to us.
Generally not, no.
So there's more in this that's even worse, but if you think about they talked about the Office of Health and Human Services, right? So we're at the hour and a half mark. We said we weren't going to go over the 2-hour mark. Yeah. Unless you want to try to start wrapping up now, I wanted to take one last look, which is at what they want to do to the Department of Health and Human Services. Because it's like, okay, so they want to, instead of having a specialist agency, they want to move it all to the Department of Health and Human Services. So what do they want to do with that?
All right. Well, let's go to that. What number? Because I can be another half an hour or so. So
481 or 449 at the bottom of the page.
481. Right at the bottom of the page. Okay. Okay, the overview. So what will Health and Human Services is HHS or HERS.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Overview. Do you want me to read that? The overview or the
Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, hang on. I might read from the beginning of that page because it's got some preamble that's probably important. If the U.S. Department
the preamble is the preamble is mostly just like Trump propaganda. Reading through the overview will give you an idea of where they're going because they start talking about their goals in over the next couple pages. And we'll have to pick up the next stream that we do on this topic talking about this because this is where a lot of the trans concerns are. But also this is even scarier than that because remember we just talked about moving a whole bunch of the funding programs that help poor kids to this agency. So let's see what they want to do to it.
Okay. HHS consists of 11 operating divisions that have varying degrees of practical independence from the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and 15 staff divisions that are currently directly under the office of the Secretary. This chapter's recommendations are limited to those divisions that most need reform and address, wherever possible, 5 cross-cutting goals.
Okay, so remember, reform in this case, because we read the intro, reform in this case means more power to the president, less agent independence.
Yeah. Goal number 1, protecting life, conscious, and bodily integrity. Oh, I'm going to be very interested in this one.
Mm-hmm.
The Secretary should pursue a robust agenda to protect the fundamental right to life, protect conscious rights.
That's code for abortion being illegal, by the way.
Yeah. Protect conscious rights and uphold bodily integrity rooted in biological realities, not ideologies. Do they understand what the term bodily integrity means? Like, do they actually understand what bodily integrity is?
I don't think. Keep going.
Okay. From the moment of conception, every human being possesses inherent dignity and worth, and our humanity does not depend on our age, state of development, race, or abilities. Bullshit, you think that. Okay, the Secretary must ensure that all HHS programs and activities are rooted in a deep respect for innocent human life from day one until natural death. Abortion and euthanasia are not health care. Holy shit. A robust respect for the sacred rights of the conscious, both at HHS among governments and institutions funded by it, increases choices for patients and program beneficiaries and furthers pluralism and tolerance. Okay, the Secretary must protect American civil rights by ensuring that HHS programs and activities follow the letter and spirit of religious freedom and conscious protection laws.
It gets worse. I want you to finish the whole page, including goal 2, because you're going to get even angrier at the next section than you are right now. Like, you're chomping at the bit to talk, but I promise you it's going to get even worse. Finish the whole thing. Keep going. Knuckle through it, guys.
I'm not going to put my commentary in there, but far out, I want to. Okay.
I can see you like dying inside. You need to finish goal 2 before you comment.
This isn't even my country. Radical actors inside and outside government are promoting harmful identity politics that replaces biological sex with subjective notions of gender identity and bases a person's worth on his or her race, sex, or other identities. This destructive dogma, under the guise of equity, threatens Americans' fundamental liberties as well as the health and well-being of children and adults alike. The next secretary must ensure that HHS programs protect children's minds and bodies, that HHS programs respect parents' basic right to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their children.
It gets worse. It gets worse.
Everyone look at my mug. Everyone look at my mug. Mug looking.
Perfect mug for this stream.
Jesus fucking Christ. Whew, okay. Goal number 2 is empowering patient choices and provider autonomy. Oh, fuck. Basic economics hold that cost tends to decrease and equality in options tend to increase when there is robust and free competition in the provision of goods and services. Healthcare is an exception. I mean, is no exception. Healthcare reform should be Healthcare reform should be patient-centered and market-based and should empower individuals to control their healthcare-related dollars and decisions. Of course, providers who deliver healthcare should also need the freedom to address the unique needs of their patients, because that fucking happens right now. States should be the primary regulators of the medical profession, and the federal government should not restrict providers' ability to discharge their responsibilities or limit their ability to innovate through government pricing controls or irrational Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement fucking schemes.
Now, we're going to remind you, Medicare is mostly for old people and disabled folks. People with Medicaid is typically for poor people. Sometimes you end up with Medicaid with disability depending on your state, but most of the time Medicaid is for people who can't afford insurance. Medicare is for people who can't get insurance because they either are older or because they have disabilities.
Yeah. Finally, Americans' broken insurance system, they're right on that one at least, run largely through confusing provider networks and third-party payers, employers, induces overconsumption of healthcare, limits consumer shopping, and hides true costs from patients. The federal government should focus reform on reducing burdens of regulatory compliance, unleashing innovation in healthcare delivery, ceasing interference in the daily lives of patients and providers, allowing alternative insurance coverage options, and returning control of healthcare dollars to patients, making decisions with their providers about their healthcare treatments and services. Holy fuck. I'm not even American. This does not affect me, and I am furious. Okay, I'm going to talk about this as a person who lives in a country that has both private health insurance and Medicare. So we are guaranteed in Australia to be able to go to the doctor and not be crippled financially. We have a guarantee. That is a huge thing. That's the Australian Medicare. We also have a 2-tiered system, which works really kind of well. I mean, a lot of people my age don't have health insurance because it's really fucking expensive. But we know that if anything goes wrong, we can go to the doctor or go to the hospital and not end up in financial debt because it is covered by our taxes. I think 1% of my taxes or maybe 2% of my taxes goes towards Medicare. Personally, I think we should actually put that up. I think we need more money in Medicare because there is at this very moment chipping away at Medicare. Like doctors are not financially compensated properly if they bulk bill. You can't, like, bulk billing is that you go to the doctor, you don't have to pay anything. So and this is this thing that's happening in Australia now, where a lot of the increase in health costs in Australia is coming from fucking America. Remember what we said? If America sneezes, the rest of the world gets cold. We're seeing this. But in Australia, we have a public system, not as great. You don't, like, if you injure yourself and you have a non-emergency, you need to go and get your knee replaced or something, it can take 2 to 3 years to get your knee replaced, but you eventually get your knee replaced. But if it's an emergency or something happens, I had an issue where there was a 5% chance that I was going to, a thing that was wrong with me was cancer. So I went in, got surgery, came out of it. I just left the hospital. Thankfully, it wasn't cancer. It was just they cut it out and they tested it wasn't cancerous. But there was a 5% chance, and they went from going, oh, you might have to wait 3 or 4 months to do this to get this through because this is an emergency, to yeah, let's do it next week. And that's what happens in Australia. So we have good healthcare. If I wanted to, I could pay for health insurance, and I could have, if I needed to stay overnight in hospital or blah, 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 whatever. But it's not necessary. In America, it is incredibly necessary, and you still get hit thousands of dollars because you had the audacity to have an emergency in a hospital that was 4,000 kilometers away from where you live.
It's even worse. Or because that hospital decided to employ an out-of-network doctor and they just so happened to be the one that treated you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, how dare you get treated by somebody?
Okay, it gets worse though. So now we've got, maybe we shouldn't federally regulate healthcare at all, or do any kind of price controls with Medicare and Medicaid. So not only do we have we need to make it illegal for trans children to get any health care at all, which is more bureaucracy, by the way. Remember when they said, oh, we need to reduce bureaucracy? That's one of the goals of this document. Except to make something illegal means that you then need to create agencies to deal with that thing being illegal. It means more paperwork and more bureaucracy. Making something legal is actually typically easier than making something illegal. And they're talking about making abortion illegal, which would need massive agencies to enforce it, and making trans healthcare for kids illegal.
Yeah.
So what about that doctor's choice stuff again? But now we need to get to the next one, which is even worse. So we have, screw poor people and screw trans people, which I'm not saying, don't clip me out of context. We have them saying that. Read goal 3.
Oh.
Atheists, perk your ears up. We're talking religious crap again.
Everyone, remember the mug. Remember the mug. Goal number 3. Okay, and in case you haven't realized this, I have not read this article, so this is my reaction live. Promoting stable and flourishing married families. So gay people can, we know that they're trying to overturn gay rights.
There's a different section of the document that states that marriage needs to be defined biblically.
Yeah. Families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society. Citation fucking needed.
There isn't one there for once. There have been citations throughout this document, but they're all to crap. Anyway.
Yeah. Unfortunately, family policies and programs under President Biden's HHS are fraught with agenda items focusing on LGBTQ equity, in inverted commas, subsidizing single motherhood, disincentivizing work, and penalizing marriage.
Citation needed.
Citation.
How is marriage penalized? As a married person, my taxes are probably better than yours are.
And I want to go back to the single motherhood thing as well. These policies should be replaced and repealed by policies that support the foundation of stable married nuclear families. Working fathers are essential to the well-being and development of their children, but the United States is experiencing a crisis of fatherlessness that is ruining our children's futures. Yeah, is that because you keep locking them fucking up?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they're brown?
Well, actually, the majority of, technically, there is a disproportionate percentage of brown people to the percentage of the population that are locked up, but there are actually more white guys locked up in prison than black people. So, it technically affects everybody. It's just that black guys are more likely to be arrested. Black, brown, red. Minorities are more likely to be arrested comparative to the percentage of the population. So it's a larger portion of them are affected. But, it's still more white prisoners overall in the prison system. I'm not arguing that that's not a racist issue on the part of the police. It absolutely is. And on the part of the judiciary. What I'm stating is, if you happen to be racist, you should still care about this.
Yeah.
Because white people are affected too.
Yeah.
If you're racist, though, you're in the wrong stream.
In the overwhelming number of cases, fathers insulate children from physical and sexual abuse, financial difficulty or poverty.
Citation needed.
Mm-hmm.
As a victim of CSA from... Not going to go there. Citation needed.
Yeah. Financial difficulty or poverty, incarceration, teen pregnancy, poor educational outcomes, high school failure, and a host of behavioral and psychological problems. What did we fucking just talk about when it came to fucking education? Okay. By contrast, homes with a non-related boyfriends present are among the most dangerous place for a child to be.
So, yeah. So, yeah. Nope, not going there. I'm not going to talk about a bunch of personal experience. I'm not going to make this about myself, but citation needed.
Citation needed. HHS should prioritize married father engagement in its messaging, health, and welfare policies. In the context of current and emerging reproductive technologies, HHS policies should never place the desires of adults over the right of children to be raised by the biological fathers and mothers who conceive them. In cases involving biological parents who are found by a court to be unfit because of abuse or neglect, the process of adoption should be speedy, certain, and supported generously by HHS. Okay, I want to go rewind. So it says here, President Biden's HHS are fraught with agenda items focusing on LGBTQ plus equity and subsidizing single motherhood. Okay, I just want to ask them a question. What happens if a woman gets pregnant by someone and they're married and then the father dies? How is she supposed to survive? They did everything right according to them. They got married. They pumped out their 15 children, and then all of a sudden the father dies or becomes incapacitated of some things. What's going to happen to her?
What if the father's a drug addict who abandons the family?
Oh yeah, but I'm just talking about, like, if you're going to do everything, they love each other, they've got a healthy relationship, the kids are well looked after, and and then all of a sudden he's in a car
Then she needs to marry another guy.
Yeah, but then again, by contrast, home with non-related boyfriends present among the most dangerous place for child.
Okay, but that's not a boyfriend. She needs to marry another guy.
Right, because suddenly if you marry, like if he's a boyfriend, he's dangerous, but if he's a husband, he's not. Is that right?
Apparently. That is in fact the ideology that is currently being put forward here. Yes. But there's an even more insidious thing to that, which is like, okay, let's ignore the fact that all of that is BS. And also ignore the fact that they talked about a certain kind of abuse in there that could potentially result in an unwedded mother. And maybe that guy shouldn't have access to the kid if you happen to know who he is. Maybe there's good reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe those people, because you know what they did in the past is they forced her to marry him.
Mm-hmm.
Or vice versa.
What if the father is her father? Are you going to force her to marry her own father?
That happens way more often than anyone thinks. In fact, that whole statistic about like unrelated boyfriends are some of the most dangerous stuff. The statistics say you're wrong. The majority of that kind of abuse happens with either close friends of the family or relatives.
Yep.
That's what the stats actually say. Also, in terms of financial difficulty or poverty, as we mentioned before, most of these families are also split by, incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
But this also gives men so much freaking power. Because if these policies are specifically only geared toward married couples that are in poverty, then that means that if a woman is in a situation, or a man, because remember, abuse goes both ways. Women are more likely to be victimized, but that does not mean that male victims should be ignored here. And male victims, if a male victim of the thing that is not consensual impregnates his attacker, he's now fully responsible for that child.
Yep.
By these policies.
Yep.
Which is just as bad.
And I'm of a strong proponent of paper abortions, obviously under the same laws required, like if an actual abortion, you got to, it's 6 weeks, and you find out you can't have the abortion or whatever. If a man is if she finds out she's pregnant and and she's 12 weeks along, and the guy's like, I don't want kids, and she can have an abortion up to 20 weeks, the guy has a right, in my opinion, to go, I'm not going to have anything to do with this child. I'm going to sign a declaration that I don't want anything to do with this child.
But this would
I'm
more or
going to
less
do a paper.
eliminate that too.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm a very strong proponent for paper abortions, because baby trapping, although rare, is a thing, and it is also a male's bodily autonomy, or the father. I'm not male. Sorry, that's not inclusive. But the father.
Well,
and when I say
male is a sex term. It's not a gender term.
Yeah.
So like person who maleness is a sex term. Like, we're talking biology there. But
yeah.
like, I do want to clarify, by the way, for anybody who got mad at me about pointing out the percentage thing, I'm not saying, by the way, that Black and brown fathers being arrested is not a major problem for minority communities. It is disproportionate by percentage. I'm just saying that they're not the majority. There's a distinct difference between those two things. They are still disproportionately much larger percentage of the population of Black and brown people are incarcerated compared to any other group. So that doesn't mean that they're not disproportionately affected. I'm saying that I didn't make a right-wing talking point there. I was pointing out that even folks who believe that whole stupid statistic thing, like, even the people who believe that, there's still a huge percentage of fathers that are not in a minority group that are still causing problems, like, because they're incarcerated for stupid things, typically drug crimes. But on top of that, though, like, the whole adoption, for those of you who are new, go see my video on Texas and indigenous erasure for why that's a fucking problem. For indigenous people, that whole process of adoption being speedy, certain, and supported by the HHS, no.
Yeah, and we all know it's going to go. Like, Christians are the ones that are going to earn. Christians are the ones that are going to get.
All right, so we're going to cover one last goal, and that is goal 4: preparing for the next health emergency. You're going to have opinions on this, Marrow.
Oh, I've already did a quick briefly thing, and the first sentence is actually legitimately hilarious. I just was like, oh, that's hilarious, considering just remember who was in power in America during COVID-19. I just think about who was it, and then I'm going to read this sentence, and you're going to probably be giggling away. Okay, preparing for the next health emergency. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated how catastrophic a micromanaging, misinformed, centralized, and politicized federal government can be.
The federal government didn't micromanage crap, but that's beside the point. Keep going.
I also like the fact that they say misinformed. Gee, I wonder who did the misinforming.
Oh, keep going. It gets worse.
Basic human rights, medical choice, and doctor-patient relationship were trampled without scientific justification. As a science communicator during COVID-19, I would like to disagree with you on that one.
We did streams on this. I did streams with my former co-host on this. I almost died from this. Anyway.
And for extended periods of time. Excess deaths not due to COVID-19 skyrocketed because of forced lockdowns, isolation, vaccine-related mass firings, and colossal disruptions to the economy and daily rhythms of life. People were fucking dying. And my mum, she got ovarian cancer, and she died due to ovarian cancer. And part of the reason being was because she couldn't get proper health because of COVID-19. But that's one of the theories. Her oncologist did tell her that they think that she died in August, and her oncologist said that they think that it started developing in January. So 7 months, because it was that aggressive. So she might not have even had that. So again, everyone get tested for cancer because it's bitch. But
I keep going. We've got 3 more
yeah.
paragraphs to get through.
So yeah, anyway, but one of the things I want to mention before I continue on is vaccine related mass firings. That's your prerogative to not get your vaccine. Don't fucking complain about it. Just don't complain about it. It is you have every right to not take a vaccine, but if you're required to have vaccine, like, this is not a new thing. You have to have vaccines. If you're working in the healthcare industry, you need to have your vaccines against um, all sorts of diseases because you could die from them. Anyway, I will continue on. The federal government's public health apparatus has lost the public's trust. I wonder why. Before the next national public health emergency, this apparatus must be fundamentally restructured to ensure a transparent, scientifically grounded, oh, of course you're going to say scientific, oh yeah, science is great, and more nimble, efficient, transparent, and targeted response that respects the unique needs and inputs of patient populations and providers. Didn't Trump fire the pandemic response team in 2019?
Yes.
Every one of the overreaching policies during the pandemic, from lockdowns and school closures to mask and vaccine mandates or passports, received its supposed legal justification from the state emergency declared and renewed by the HHS secretary. Tellingly, however, the threshold for what constitutes a public health emergency, how many cases, hospitalizations, deaths, etc., was never defined. For the sake of democratic accountability, we must know with clarity what will trigger the next emergency declaration and, just as important, what will trigger its end. Unaccountable bureaucrats like Anthony Fauci should never again have such broad, unchecked power to issue health guidelines that will certainly be the basis for federal and state mandates. Fucking hell. Never again should public health bureaucrats be allowed to hide information, ignore information, or mislead the public concerning the efficacy or dangers associated with any recommended health interventions because they believe it may lead to hesitancy on the part of the public. I bet they're talking about masks and how dangerous they are. They are not. The only way to restore public trust in HHS as an institution capable of acting responsibly during a health emergency is through the best of disinfectants, light.
All right. Last point. We've got 10 minutes to be mad.
Yes. Goal number 5, instituting greater transparent accountability and oversight.
Nope. We have discussions on number 4. Like, that's the last point. We can pick up on the next one on our next stream, but you needed to be out within 2 hours. We've got 10 minutes to be mad about point 4.
Okay.
And wrap up. So now, do you guys see, to an extent, I want the chat to think about this while we discuss our opinions on point 4. Do you guys see why I'm starting to compare some of these things to the Italian fascist movement? So think about that, maybe discuss it amongst yourselves. When it comes to seizing power and centralizing it and stripping independent actors like the Department of Health, for example, of their authority and centralizing it under the president, we are looking, and also remember what I talked about how the ideology of fascism is power.
Yeah.
They're contradicting themselves every other page. So think about that, discuss it amongst yourselves. Marrow, get pissed.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about forced lockdowns. Yes, okay. So there are some theories, some ideas that the death toll to COVID-19 was not 1%, but could have been up to 10%. Considering COVID-19 is very closely related to SARS-CoV-2 is very closely related to SARS-CoV-1, which did actually have a death rate of 10%. It would not surprise me. I hate to break it to you, but 10% of 375 million people is a lot of people. That's what 37.5 million people could have died from COVID-19 if it was the 10%. Even if it wasn't the 10%, that's 3.7 million people. We're not even just talking about death rates. We're talking about the actual problems with people dying of the healthcare burden. So how many people had went to hospital with COVID-19 would have gone if you'd let it run rampant? how many people would have gone to hospital with COVID-19 that could have been taken up for somebody who was having a heart attack, people who had like people who had car accidents, they still happened. Strokes, heart attacks, all the things that aren't even related to COVID-19 was still happening, and yet people were um, taking up beds and doctor's appointments and things like that because of COVID-19. So excess deaths, not due to COVID-19, skyrocketed because of forced lockdowns. No, they didn't die not because of forced lockdowns. Forced lockdowns saved people's lives. And even though
And
it's
the states that
bullshit.
enforced them the most rigorously had the lowest death counts.
Yeah, exactly. And I do understand I have heard some horrible stories where people are like, I needed to go and get I needed my a mastectomy or something. I needed surgeries and I couldn't have my surgery for my cancer. And now I'm terminal. I'm not going to die. I'm going to die from it due to COVID-19 lockdowns. And that is stupidly disgusting. And it's that's heartbreaking. And I have so much sympathy and empathy for these people who've gone through that they should have kept certain things continuing. But COVID-19 was COVID-19 is cause like everyone didn't we got to look if we look back and we said, oh, we could have done that. We didn't know what COVID-19 was. We literally had no idea. We still don't know what it's going to do in the long term. There are studies have come out that 6 to 12 months after people who have had COVID, like severe COVID-19 are dying due to heart attacks and blood clots and things like that. In 6 months, they recover and they're still dying due to these sorts of things. I did read a study where the people
not
who
to
get
mention all of the long COVID things, they think that it might also be altering how ATP synthesis, which by the way is how your cells function, like it's how they feed themselves. They think that it alters the way that mitochondria do that. And that's part of why you get long fatigue from long COVID, which both of us had long COVID after we got COVID. Like it took over 2 years before I got all my energy back. And I still don't feel like I'd have it all back. I still get winded going up hills.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's multifactorial. It's not black and white. And this is one of the things that shits me a lot about a lot of conservative people. It's like if it didn't work 100%, it was evil. Nothing ever in life is black and white. There is always, there's so many things. So people were forced to stay with their abusers. There were increased deaths due to COVID-19, but
And
there
lots
were
of
also
divorces.
and divorces and things like that. But also there were decreased deaths due to COVID-19. So thousands of people's lives were saved because nobody was driving. Like literally no one was driving. So death rates due to
Drunk
people
driving, car accidents,
driving,
etc.
yeah. So that
Also, we killed an entire branch of the flu.
yeah, exactly. Like there is the 1918 flu epidemic finished in 2020. So vaccine related mass firings, that's your fucking fault. I'm sorry, I have zero sympathy for people who lost their jobs because they refuse to have a vaccine. I'm
Because if you
sorry.
couldn't because you had a reaction to it or something, you got an exemption. So, like,
Yeah,
you can't say people who are allergic to it or had a reaction or whatever, that, like, they got fired. No, they
yeah,
didn't. You get the same thing as any other vaccine. If you can't have the vaccine, everybody else needs to get vaccinated to protect you even more.
yeah. So when it comes to vaccine related mass firings, I had like if you refuse the vaccine because of whatever stupid reason, like one that's not a legitimate reason, which is, if you had an allergic reaction to it or whatever, if that's you, I have zero sympathy.
Well, and I'm
Um,
going to say I will defend some of the people who are hesitant initially because of the fact that the tech was new. I will defend that is like,
I will
but
agree with you
after
in that one.
yeah, I will defend some of the people who hesitated initially because the tech was new. Because, like, yeah, they're right. They didn't go through the full rigorous testing they should have. There was a lot
Well,
more
they
rigorous
did
testing of the
actually.
RNA vaccine technology generally. But like there wasn't enough time for the regulations, like regulators, to fully examine all of the data and everything because it was a state of emergency. I can defend
Yeah.
people who might have been hesitant for that reason. At this
Yeah,
point, though,
but
you don't have that excuse anymore.
yeah, but also a lot of I did a video on the COVID-19 vaccine. The thing is that the mRNA technology has been around since the 1980s. They've been
Well, yeah, I'm
researching it
aware.
since the
Like I
1980s.
said, there's research done on it. I was saying this specific vaccine, due to the unique qualities of COVID-19 generally, and we didn't really know how the antibodies were going to interact with people and things of that nature. That's the concern. We didn't have as much testing for that because,
Yeah,
sometimes there could be weird things. Like we had people who had like bizarre side effects from it to begin with. Like not all of the crazy that people thought, but like I had nasty side effects.
yeah.
Like,
So,
I can understand initial hesitance due to that and due to not understanding the rigorous testing that the mRNA technology itself underwent. Because a lot of people tried to argue the mRNA was too new. And I was like, no, this vaccine specifically didn't have as long of a testing period as it should have.
yeah. So if you want some more information, uh, go onto my channel and look up vaccine COVID-19. If you just type that in, you'll find my video. Okay. And colossal disruptions of the economy and daily rhythms of life. Well, yeah, I hate to break it to you, but 1% of your population dying would also have colossal disruptions to the economy and daily rhythms of life. Like, Jesus Christ.
Potentially up to 10%.
And potentially up to 10.
So, Mara, we are at the 2-hour mark, so we need to give our wrap up total conclusion, and we can revisit this if people are interested. Probably not the next stream if you want to still do the snake thing, unless you want to revisit this because it's made you even angrier now that you realize that all of my warnings to you about how bad this was. We can discuss that.
Well, I wouldn't mind coming back, but I think having multiple streams in a row might get a bit boring. So, chat, what do you think? Do you want to hear about have a little bit of a science video on a bit of psychology? Ali can talk about that. I can talk about my opinions on how people teach their offspring to be afraid of snakes. And
By the way, Mero's channel is linked in the live chat and also the description. Every one of our bridge videos, it's linked in the description.
Yeah, but we do need a round 2. We absolutely need a round 2. Also, this is a ongoing thing. So maybe in the next couple of weeks, we'll see how this happens. But would you guys prefer a snack stream next time round or continue reading through this?
Let us know in the comments, not the live chat. So go down into the comments, and as soon as the stream ends, leave us a comment. Let us know which one you want. Mero, final thoughts. Italian fascism, my overview of history, what we've seen so far in this document. Your thoughts.
Well, I've always, for quite some time, I've thought that Republicans were fascists. Like, it's pretty clear. I mean, their attitudes and all that jazz are pretty obviously fascistic. And this is just basically ripping the mask so far off. They're also taking the skin. Now we've just got to this is scary. This is genuinely scary. And yeah.
And they're just outwardly brazenly saying it. That's what's crazy is, I mean, the very first section is called seizing the reins. And when you actually go through and you read some of the intro, we're going to go back on the second stream and read the actual intro where a lot of the triggering trans stuff is. But like I said, I wanted to focus on here's the policies that they want to do to these different branches of government so that they can centralize power under the president. Because like I said, yeah, trans people should be scared. Yeah, LGBTQ people generally should be scared. But the problem that I have is that y'all should be a lot more scared of the sheer amount of power they're trying to seize than even the opinions that they have to begin with these sorts of like policies, because like they might be able to enact some of that stuff just by getting a majority in Congress. They can get the power to kill people if they
Yeah.
are able to seize this much executive privilege.
Okay.
And
Can
that's
I
the
quickly
problem.
Can I quickly comment on something that Sable Eagle wrote? On the nasty side effects thing, did you hear about the 6 people who died of myocarditis within 2 weeks of getting vaccinated, based on
Okay, read.
background rate of diagnosis and case fatality rates? Okay, I'm going to be quickly talk about
But
this.
like, look, without the vaccinations, we'd have to expect 8 fatalities. So that again, that was a 2-part post.
Oh, sorry about that. So one of the things that people don't understand when it comes to vaccines is vaccines are actually a medication. They're not. They're not. They're preventative. So same reason, like things like statins are preventative against heart attacks and high blood cholesterol, and like you might take a paracetamol or a acetaminophen to stop you from getting a migraine or whatever. People still die from medication. From all medications have a fatality rate. Every single one of them. In medical ethics, you actually have to sit down and look at how effective a disease, a drug is, and how it can affect the body, the person's body versus the disease. So that's why chemotherapy, everyone agrees it's horrible for you and it can cause so much and makes you sick and everything, but it stops you from dying. But in the future, it can cause you to die. Radiation can cause you to get cancer again, but you've already got cancer. And so all medication has side effects that can cause death. The
The COVID-19
the
vaccine doesn't have any more side effects that could potentially cause death than any other vaccine that's ever been released or any other
Yep.
medication. There are some, like Adderall is more likely to kill you than the vaccine is.
Yep. And so the COVID-19 vaccine, I think it was like a 1 in a million chance that you could have died from the Johnson Johnson one, which was the attenuated virus one, not the mRNA. There was no mRNA associated vaccine deaths associated with it. However, we don't know.
It's easier
But
to accidentally overdose on ibuprofen and Tylenol than it was to die from the vaccine. But we
yeah,
need to finish our wrap up because you said you needed to get out, and I know how important this is, but we can talk about it at any time. And you
yeah,
said you needed to get to a place by a time.
yes, I've got to get to work. So I do have a little bit of extra time. So anyway, so yeah, the Republicans are fascists. I like, you can't, anyone who says that they're not is just historically illiterate, in my opinion. They're either historically illiterate or they have a reason to think that they're not fascists. And it doesn't matter how much convincing you have to give them, they won't. They won't believe you. No, what about this? What about this? No, they're fascists. There's no two ways about it. That's my personal opinion.
So, where do you sit? Like, do you think that my comparison here to the fascist movements with Italy is warranted?
Very, very warranted.
So, do you feel like I clickbaited everybody?
You
Because that's
know,
the most important thing, of course.
clickbait
so,
is important.
so there's a reason why I used that black shirts image there, and that is because if you actually look at the policies they want to implement, banning abortion, mothers should be mothers and not people. The idea of like, now granted, they want to decentralize some of the control over things like education, except when it comes to trans people, because if you read the beginning part, they talk about how trans novels and things should be classified as pornography and pornography should become illegal. Even though they keep saying the government should be smaller, and making something illegal means that you've got to figure out some way to prosecute it.
Yeah.
So the problem is that, as just like the fascists, they are appealing to a ridiculous form of populism, and their only ideology is power. They want to increase complexity in the government when it suits them, and they want to cut off power for anything that's going to stop them from enacting their will. They want to centralize authority in the executive by redirecting and quote unquote reforming agencies that at present are more on the independent side, such as the Federal Election Commission that they want to bring under the heel of the DOJ, which there's a good reason why that's independent. They want to stop the Federal Election Commission from ever being able to not be in a deadlock about these sorts of decisions, but also force this deadlocked agency to make prosecution decisions when it comes to violating campaign finance laws and government corruption.
Yeah.
They want to call spending money a First Amendment right. And if you notice, every single thing is like every single policy we've outlined is increasing class striation in society. They want rich people to have better benefits and outcomes, and they want the rest of us to go eat rocks. Literally, in some cases, because they want to cut food stamps.
Yep, that's a great idea. Just starve people to death. That's never caused an uprising before at all. I've never heard of.
It's not now. I'm doing it. I'm closing the stream. I'm giving that the wrap up argument.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I wouldn't say it's a perfect one-to-one comparison, but they are definitely like this. We can definitely call this a fascist movement. And for once, you now have evidence that that is not hyperbole. And that is the point of this stream. Because fascism is something that gets thrown around way too easily. Fascism is one of those terms that people love to sling as an insult, just like bringing Hitler up. That's also why I compared them not to the Weimar Republic, but to Italy. Because, well, Mussolini literally wrote the book. But also, it's important to understand what the fascists did and what their movement looked like and why they allied themselves with who they did. And to see those parallels, not only because of the fact that there are parallels and that it's pretty important to learn from history, but also because it's so easy to just say, well, that's fascist, when in reality, what you're seeing is probably authoritarian. Fascism is authoritarian, but it also has specific qualities to it. And this is a true fascist manifesto on how to overthrow a democracy. And yeah, we can keep going through it if you guys want us to. Yeah. But like, obviously not tonight.
Yeah,
but like,
let us know. Let us know if you want Snake next time, or continue on with this.
In the comments, leave a comment. So with that, we bid you adieu because Mero needs to get to work, but I hope that this has armed you guys with some knowledge, both with the history. I highly encourage you to do some of your own research on the rise of Mussolini in fascist Italy, because you'll see a lot of parallels, and it's very important to understand how these things have happened in the past, because Hitler got his blueprint from Mussolini. So if you want to compare things to Hitler, you'll be more educated if you research Mussolini.
Yeah. If you want to listen to a good podcast that does a lot of talks about historical bastards, Behind the Bastards, it's run by Robert Evans. It's very, very good, very entertaining, very funny, and very much you die inside. So you should, so Behind the Bastards. I haven't gone through his entire backlog, but I'm guarantee you there's Mussolini's in there. So
have a wonderful night. Be safe, everyone. We'll continue our allyship work as we always have. The next stream will be next week, which is when our streams would normally be. I was too sick for last week, so we are going to be doing the next stream next week. So leave your comments as soon as possible so we know what topic we're going to be doing and can prepare accordingly. Have a wonderful night, and remember, we're stronger together.
And don't give yourself the raw prawn.